The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Vermont Community Foundation's Grantseeker Webinar. I'm Jen Peterson, the Vice President for Program and Grants here at the Foundation. In my role, I have the great honor and pleasure of overseeing the grant making that we do. I work with an incredibly smart and compassionate team of people to run many competitive grant rounds, and we work with some amazing donors who love Vermont and want to use their resources to make the world a better place. So I get to spend all of my working hours with people who are being so generous, and it's an amazing privilege. Speaking of generous, we have a big crowd giving their time to be online with us today. More than 130 of you signed up. This is the first time we've done this kind of forum as a webinar. We wanted to see if we could try and reach a broader audience, save time and travel for all of us, and reduce our collective carbon footprint with less driving. Given this turnout, I'd say so far, so good. Some technical information for you. If you're having trouble seeing or hearing at any point, you can submit a question in the questions/chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and our fabulous technology wizard, Richard, will see what he can do to help you out. Because there are so many of you, we won't be taking questions about the content of this webinar until the end. Instead, we'll be endeavoring to answer as many of the questions submitted through the early registration process as we can throughout the presentation. We'll even call out a few specific ones at the end. So again, if you have technical questions about the webinar, enter them in the chat box. Otherwise, hold on to your seat, and if we don't answer it over the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll give you a chance to ask a few questions in the last 15 minutes. It does look like we'll be ending about 15 minutes early, so you should plan to be done around 2:45. I'm here today with several of those amazing colleagues I was telling you about from the Foundation, and we're excited to connect with you. We'll do our best to make sure it's valuable for you and that you have a better understanding of how you might work with the Foundation in the future. We will spend some time sharing different aspects of our work and how you can connect with us. And we know you all do incredibly important work, and we want you to know that the Foundation is a place with real people who are accessible and who want to help. We're aiming for you to take away 3 essential points from this webinar. We want you to understand the process by which we make our grants and how to participate in that process. We're not going to review our grant rounds specifically today because all of that information is available on our website. So check that out and be in touch if you have specific questions. Today, what we want to do is share with you some information about what resources we use to make grants, what happens after you apply for a grant, and then when we let you know if you've received it. We also want to provide greater insight into what makes a strong proposal. This was a question that was asked by many of you in the early registration process, and we're hoping to answer it in multiple ways so that you have the best possible chance of being successful, and so that we get to really understand how important and terrific your work is. We also have a lot to share with you besides grants. The foundations and others have some great resources for nonprofits that we want to make sure you know about, so we'll be spending some time talking with you about that today as well. So for the agenda, I'll start us off by offering a brief introduction to the Foundation so you have some context about the organization behind the grant making. After, my colleague Janet will share some specifics about our overall grant making, who makes decisions, and how our competitive grant rounds fit into the larger picture of the Foundation. That's important because our grant making dollars come from a variety of sources, as you'll see. Then Lauren and I will walk you through the process of applying for a grant through several of our signature competitive grant rounds. Christopher and Patrick will follow that with some great details about other resources that you should know about. As part of registering for the webinar, we asked you to share any questions you're hoping we will answer today. Again, we received great questions from many of you that we'll answer throughout the presentation, and there'll be some explicit time at the end dedicated to questions that we weren't able to answer, and then some open mic time where you can ask questions directly in the moment. We'll wrap up by 2:45, and hopefully you'll be signing off feeling like you got what you came for. You'll have the opportunity to fill out a feedback survey when you log off the webinar so we can see if that's true. And we'll be recording this webinar, and we'll make it available to you in your email and on our website for future reference and for those who weren't able to attend today. Again, if you have any technical issues, you can enter them in the chat/questions box. So let's get started. Many of you are familiar with the foundation and have already received a grant or two from us. The Community Foundation's primary focus is to help build vital and healthy Vermont communities by connecting and mobilizing people through giving to increase impact. We're in the business of bringing people together to make Vermont a better place. Philanthropy is our tool. Bringing people together is the fundamental part of that vision, and it's our core belief that by working together and giving together, the impact that we can have is multiplied enormously. We know that we're better together. So here's a little bit of basic information about us. We were founded in 1986 and we're located in Middlebury, Vermont. We're actually one of over 700 community foundations in the country and fairly unique in our statewide reach because most community foundations focus on one city or one county or a region. We have about $200 million in assets under management. Like a private foundation, we invest these dollars and use the earnings to make grants to nonprofits. Unlike a private foundation, we're made up of hundreds of smaller funds and foundations, more than 680 in fact. And last year, those 680 funds combined to make more than $15 million in grants. Now this sounds like a big pot of money, but it doesn't all come from one place, and it doesn't all wind up in our competitive grant rounds. So now I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague Janet to give you more information about where the money comes from and how grants get out our doors and into the community.
Thank you, Jen. I'm Janet McLaughlin, and I've been a member of the Program and Grants team here at the Community Foundation for about 2.5 years. Today, I want to provide you with a big picture perspective on our grant-making programs. As Jen said, we're not going to review what you can read on the website, but if you have visited the website, you've probably gone to the available grants page. And you've probably noticed that it goes on for quite a while, with over 20 different grant programs listed. And you probably noticed that they all have different focuses and different sizes and different deadlines. And you may have asked yourself, why? Why would the Community Foundation organize their grant programs like that? So, this afternoon, I'm going to be sharing some information to help you explain it. And before I just jump in, I want to say, don't worry if pie charts are not your thing. You can still successfully apply for a grant from us without understanding exactly what I'm about to show you. But we know from your questions and from talking with many of you that having this kind of background information can be helpful. So this pie chart shows the nearly $15.8 million that left the Vermont Community Foundation as grants in 2014. It's a lot of money, but it's not one giant pool or one grant-making process. The money comes to the foundation and then goes out in lots of different ways. And with this pie chart, I'll show you who made the decisions about where the money goes. So starting with the largest piece of the pie, in blue, are donor-advised and committee-advised grants. More than half the money that goes out of the door is directed by the people who established an advised fund at the Community Foundation. This means that a person or a group of people gave a chunk of money to the foundation, we invested it for them, and now they can recommend to us which nonprofits should receive a grant from their fund. And so these donors let the Community Foundation know that they just went to a great performance and they'd like to send the theater company a donation of $500, or it's their reunion year at their alma mater and they'd like to give $10,000. For the most part, these donors make their decisions based on their passions and affiliations, just like any of us do. But the Community Foundation does see our role as helping our donor advisors to learn about the great organizations and great projects happening in the community. And we do provide a way for them to co-fund projects with us through a program called Giving Together that Jen will be describing later. Now the next piece of the pie, the red piece, is supporting organizations. You can basically think of these as mini foundations within the foundation. They have their own boards and grant processes. We currently have 4 of them. The High Meadows Fund focuses on Vermont's response to climate change, and the McClure Foundation focuses on access to post-secondary and career education for Vermonters. These two have their own grant-making programs, and you can find links to their websites on ours. The other two are the Addison Community Athletic Foundation and the Permanent Fund for Vermont's Children, which focuses on early childhood education. These two operate their own programming, and they do not have open grant rounds. The next piece of the pie is nonprofit distributions, the green wedge in this chart. These are the grants in which the grantee is established as the fund is set up. This could be a nonprofit's own endowment, or it could be that a donor sets up a fund, and instead of making grant decisions each year, she says that she wants a certain percentage of funds to go to 3 specific nonprofits every year. We currently have more than 200 funds like this set up, and you'll hear from our colleague Patrick later about how to create a fund for your organization if that's a fit. Now the next piece of the pie, the little gray wedge, that's the 3% of other, is what doesn't fit nicely into the other categories. These are mostly scholarships, though we really don't do too many of those because the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, or VSAC, is really the in-state expert on that work. So the final purple slice is our staff-directed grant funds. These are the funds that the Community Foundation has been entrusted to distribute according to our sense of the needs and the priorities in the state. This is really what many people think of when they think of the Community Foundation's grant making. Now these staff-directed grants come from multiple funds. They're not completely open. These are the funds that are at the staff's discretion to determine how to meet the donor's intent. Now we have some funds that are unrestricted, but we have others that are designed to support a specific region like the Upper Valley or specific issues like hunger and homelessness. So what does all of that mean to you as grant seekers? Well, basically it means that there's sort of a subset of our grants that come from the Community Foundation that you can apply for. And you guys know that. That's why you're on this call. In 2014, 13%, or about $2 million of the funds that the Vermont Community Foundation distributed went through our competitive grant programs. The information I've shared with you also shows that these dollars come from a mix of staff-directed, donor-advised, and committee-advised funds. So we've set up different grant programs to meet the various interests of our fund holders and the needs in our state. So mentally, you can return to that long list of available grants that I showed earlier. Those are the competitive grant rounds that you can apply to. That's how you can access that $2 million. And there's a few categories within that. First, there's our our community fund grant rounds. These are statewide and designed by the staff with those discretionary funds we're tasked with. And then there are issue-based and geography-specific grant rounds, which are nearly all focused on the interests and priorities of the donors or committees who helped establish them. For our community fund grant rounds, the staff designed these 4 rounds based on the values and strategies that the Foundation board and staff believe are critical to our mission of building a healthy and vital Vermont. All 4 of these grant programs make grants across the state, and 3 of them support all issue areas. You can read those details on the website, but the quick summary is our small and inspiring grants fund projects that build connections in our communities. Innovations and collaboration grants fund collaborative approaches that are cross-sector. Special and urgent needs grants support emergency needs and unforeseen opportunities. And finally, our Big Impact Initiative is designed to go deep on an area of particular importance to Vermont. This is currently what my main project is, which is our Food and Farm Initiative. One important thing to note with these community fund grant programs is that we aim to inspire additional giving and collaboration among donors. We educate our fund holders about the grants we're considering from our staff-directed funds through our Giving Together program. There are a few other grant rounds that also use Giving Together, but these are really the primary ones. And as Jen will share with you later, this program makes a big difference in our ability to fund as much of your great work as we can. Now, for the issue-specific and geography-specific grants, the thing that we want you to know is that the focus and requirements vary by grant program. The decision-making processes vary by grant program. The decision makers vary by grant program. Some are a committee of community members. Some are advised by specific donors working with us to maintain anonymity. Some examples are the Vermont Women's Fund, focused on girls and young women, and the Hills and Hollows Fund that supports nonprofits in or near Poultney. So what that means is that it's very important to read the information on the website for each specific grant round, and not to make assumptions about one grant round based on the way another one is organized. So that might seem a little bit confusing, but there's good news. And that good news is that you can apply to any that apply to you. Again, these are separate processes with different decision makers. So you can go ahead, click through the website, read about the various grant rounds, and apply to the ones that fit your projects. One project might receive funding from the Northeast Kingdom Fund, the Green Mountain Fund, and Innovations and Collaborations. So sometimes we might refer you from one grant round to another, or we might bring what we learn from one grant program to another grant program. But you should know that you are welcome to apply to any of the grant programs for which your project or your organization fits the guidelines. Another hint I wanted to share was that at the top and the bottom of the available grants page, there's a link that says, click here to download a printable version of this page. And that lists all of the grant rounds in one PDF. So if you're a paper person, you can print one out and then cross things out or circle the ones that you want to look into more. So now, before I turn things over to Jen, I wanted to give you a little bit more information about what our grant making looks like from a bird's eye view. So I'm going to just show two more graphics. This chart shows all of the grants made by the Community Foundation in 2014, broken down by issue area. Here at the Foundation, it is our responsibility to fund projects that make Vermont better in multiple ways: arts, environment, health, education, you name it. So nearly all nonprofits can fit somewhere. We try to have expertise in each area on our staff, and we seek out the best thinking if it's something that we don't know that much about. We really are open to all types of programming. So what we're looking at is your proposals fit with the guidelines of that grant round and the impact it will have. Now, I also want to emphasize that we do make grants throughout the state and at various scales. This graphic shows the number of grants from the competitive grant rounds that go through our Giving Together program. And they're organized by the geographic reach of the project. We fund local, multi-county, and statewide efforts. So this map shows that we made grants in every county in 2014 and how many grants were made in each county. And it also lists that we made 42 grants with a statewide reach and 53 grants that are serving multiple counties. So what we really want you to know is that we do have a priority of serving every county. For places where there are fewer grants, it most typically means that we're getting fewer proposals from those counties. That sometimes reflects the number of nonprofits. It often reflects the number of people. But know that we do want to fund projects throughout the state. We do consider which counties have more nonprofit and philanthropic resources in the state. And we want to make a special effort to support those areas where there might not be as many grants to apply for. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jen to tell you more about the application and review process.
Thank you, Janet. So now that you have a view of the foundation from the high level, let's take it back down to the ground. I want to walk you through the life cycle of your grant application now. So the journey of the grant application actually begins right now. You come to our Grant Seeker Forum and we give you the secret formula for how to write a winning proposal. Well, it might not be that easy, but we're going to give you all the information you need to give it your best shot. Either after or perhaps before the webinar, you visit our website and learn about all the grant rounds available and identify the ones that are aligned to your work. Most of the information you need is there, so please review it carefully. For example, each grant round lists who's eligible to apply. In general, our grants have to be made to registered 501c3 nonprofits, a category which includes most schools and municipalities. Other groups can apply if they have a nonprofit as a fiscal sponsor. As a rule, we cannot give grants to individuals, though there is one exception, the Vermont Arts Endowment Fund, which does make a few grants to individual artists. Sometimes there are geographic or issue-based restrictions as well, as Janet mentioned, so definitely read the website carefully. If you read the website and still have questions or aren't sure if your idea or project fits our guidelines, please call. We're happy to talk to you and help and decide if it's a match or not. It's not worth anyone's time to try and make a case when it doesn't really fit. Also, in general, you can apply to more than one grant round for your project. In the instances that this is not an option, we make that clear in the guidelines. The next step is your planning and writing of the proposal. I just want to pause here to mention that this is really the part of the process where you have complete control. This is the recipe for your success. This is one of the questions many of you ask, the strength of your proposal. And it's based on some key factors. These are the screens we use in evaluating your individual proposals. You've checked that your idea or project meets the guidelines for the grant rounds. You've taken the time to think through and plan your project and can demonstrate a realistic set of goals, strategies, activities, timeline, and impact with a reasonable and achievable budget. So we look for reasonableness of budgets on both ends of the spectrum. So don't under-resource yourself so that you won't be able to do a great job just to present a smaller grant budget. We also want to make sure that you have a few contingency plans in your back pocket if you don't get full funding. You've taken the time to clearly explain the need and timeliness of your work to address it. Don't assume that we understand the problem or why you've chosen a particular approach. Take the time to spell that out. You've mapped out the work that you're planning and how it will lead to a particular outcome. This was another question from registrants. How do we think about measuring success and impact? We're really looking to understand who or what is better off because of the project. We do gauge our expectations on the size of the grants, and we are looking for a demonstration that you understand what might be beyond numbers of people reached or acres conserved. No matter what the size of the grant, we're always looking to see who your partners are and how much collaboration you're doing. Remember, our motto is that we're better together, and we apply that to you as well as ourselves. We don't expect that every project will involve deep collaboration, but we do expect to understand that you know and work with the players in your field, or perhaps others who are not in your field but who are serving the same populations. I'll talk in a moment about how we share proposals with our fund holders, and one of the concerns that they've shared with us is feeling like there's a lot of duplication of effort and inefficient use of resources. So this is an important one to spend some time on. Another lens that we put on proposals is how understandable the financial reports are. What I'll encourage here is that you really look at what you're submitting to us with an eye of someone who doesn't know anything about where your funding comes from, why you might spend so much on mileage, or how your restricted funding crosses your fiscal year and makes it look like you have a big surplus. We won't guess, but it's hard not to make assumptions when we don't have any insight, so definitely provide some narrative where you think it would be helpful. Next, tell a great story. Stories are so important to the foundation. Stories are how people connect personally to you, to your mission, and what you're trying to do. They give meaning to the data. We've incorporated a section for you on our applications to tell us a story and on our reports as well. We use these stories to share your work with other funders. It can be easy to default to just talking about what you will do, but what we're really looking for is a description of what success will look like in real life, on the ground, and in people's lives. So don't just tell us, show us. Don't rush on this section of the application. It's really important. And finally, plan well. Make sure you have all the information and letters of support by the deadline. Start writing your application early and save your work often. Submit your grant on time. Waiting until the last minute is risky. We do set our deadlines at 5 so that we're here to help with any submission difficulties. But we get a lot of calls on deadline day, so don't wait until the last minute to get your questions answered because there's going to be a queue. In fairness to everyone submitting an application on time, we are strict about not accepting late proposals, even if they're only a minute late. So once you've done all you can do to put together a strong proposal, you submit it to the foundation, and then you get to sit back and relax. Well, it might not feel like relaxing, but at that point, as I've said, it's really out of your hands. Once you've submitted your application, a whole pool of proposals in the grant round is read by a crackerjack team of experts here at the foundation. In actuality, it depends on the grant round who is actually reading the proposal. For the most part, staff read all the proposals, though some grant rounds are for donor-advised funds, and they have an advisory group that reads them. For the community fund grant rounds, staff read the applications and pick the top proposals to share with our fund holders. This is the Giving Together program that Janet kept mentioning. You'll see a sample of Giving Together for a past Samara Fund grant round on your screen. Each proposal has a summary of the project, a story, and staff comments about the proposal as well as a picture. We pull the summary, story, and picture directly from the proposal and put that together with other proposals to share with all of our donor advisors and invite them to co-fund with us. To be clear, this is your best opportunity at the foundation to get in front of our donor advisors. A clear project description, a good story, and a great picture can make all the difference here. The more engagement we have from our donor advisors, the more funds we have to award in the grant round. So we're working in partnership with you on this one to multiply the impact of philanthropy. We usually give donors about 4 to 5 weeks to respond to the Giving Together options. Giving Together is an important advising tool for our staff who work with the donors. Our philanthropic advisors will often meet with donors they advise and walk them through the Giving Together grant round that's out, providing additional information to help them determine which, if any, proposals they want to support. Sometimes they will support the grant round overall, so staff have additional money at their discretion to make grants. While this whole process can add a fair amount of time to the wait for you, it allows us to significantly grow the amount of money we can give away. Last year, we had contributions from 51 fund holders through Giving Together that totaled $570,000. So then, once Giving Together dollars are determined, we assess how much money we have to give away and make final award decisions based on that, as well as trying to cover a breadth of issues and a broad geographic reach across the state. So just to recap, decisions are made based on the strength of your proposal, which is the one piece that you have control over, the whole pool of proposals, and our interest in reaching a breadth of issues across the state. Donor advised support through Giving Together for individual proposals, and the total amount of funding available. Once the decisions are made, then the work of the fabulous Lauren Bruno here at the foundation begins. So I'm going to turn it over to her to describe how you hear about what happens next.
Hi everyone, I am Lauren Bruno, Program and Grants Associate here at the Community Foundation, and my role is to help you through the application and award process. As Jen mentioned, I'm going to talk a little about what happens after grant decisions are made. First of all of our planned notification dates are available on each grant program's application guidelines webpage. These are usually listed toward the bottom of the page alongside the application deadlines. Timelines vary by grant program and can take 2, 3, or up to 4 months from the application submission to notification, depending on who has to read the applications and whether or not the program goes through Giving Together. Add administrator at grantsinterface.com to your address book. Once decisions are made, notifications for both awards and denials are sent by email from the email address administrator@grantsinterface.com, which is connected to our online grants manager. It is a good idea to add this email to your address book to avoid any notifications getting caught in your spam filter. Email notifications and other communications during the grant review process will be sent to the email address associated with the original grant application. We welcome questions while you are waiting for word on your grant application, so talk to us. Please let us know if your contact person changes at any point so we can get this updated. We also want to know if anything changes in terms of your project plan, timeline, or budget. If you are waiting for a notification and have checked the dates on our website and for our messages in your email and still have not heard by the expected deadline, please let us know. We don't want to leave you hanging. So what happens next? If your project gets funded, your email notification will give you a sense of when grant award paperwork will be mailed. Grant awards are mailed to the primary contact at your organization or to your fiscal sponsor with a copy to you. Be on the lookout. If you don't get a check, please let us know. VCF grant checks are valid for 90 days, so do not delay in depositing your check. Next, write a thank you. As we talked about earlier, we often share grant proposals with our fund holders and invite them to co-fund projects with us. They have the option of making grants anonymously or being named. If your grant is co-funded, we will include specific grant acknowledgement guidelines with your paperwork. It will explain how to thank these fund holders and may provide contact information. We believe that every contribution deserves a personal and timely thank you letter or note, so please craft a meaningful message. When in doubt, just send a general thank you directly to the VCF and we will pass it on. Next, get the word out. Many of our grant programs, including all of the community fund grants, now come with press kits in the award letter. This information is also on our website in the Resources for Nonprofits section. Since a lot of folks have never worked with the media before, we provide advice on how to publicize your grant award, including a sample press release, sample tweet, and the contact information for your local media. You can expand knowledge of your work within your community by publicizing your award, and a local press release from you is more likely to get picked up in your local paper or radio station than the more general list of grant awards that the foundation sends out statewide. We love to see our grantees featured, so feel free to send on any articles or mentions that you are particularly proud of. Lastly, don't forget to submit your grant report. We want to know how your project goes so we can share your stories with the fund advisors who co-funded grants with us, as well as highlight the great work of our grantees in our newsletters and other materials. Your grant paperwork will outline the requirements for submitting a grant report in the online grants manager. These are typically due 30 days from fully spending the grant funds or 1 year after the grant is made, whichever comes first. If you reapply for the same grant program, you will need to submit at least an interim grant report with your new application. If you run into any challenges with your project, whether related to timeline, budget, activities, partners, whatever it may be, please let us know when it arises, rather than at the end of your grant timeline. We can help you think of creative solutions and approve extensions or changes. So, now what happens when you don't get funded? We wish we could fund every eligible project, but every round of grant awards, we will have to deny some applicants. In your notification email, we will include a contact person to request feedback on your denied project. Once you reach out, we'll provide some initial information from the Grant Decision Committee and can have a further discussion if needed to delve into any specifics. As Jen mentioned earlier, there's only a certain amount that you can control as an applicant, and we will try to give you a sense of how your application fit into the grant round and whether or not it makes sense to reapply. You're welcome to call or email us, and we will try to respond within a week. Also, check out our Resources for Nonprofits webpage. We offer other resources to help guide you as a grant seeker and as a member of the Vermont nonprofit community. Next up will be my colleague, Christopher Kaufman-Ilstrup, to share some ideas for training and making connections to help build your organization.
Hello everybody, this is Christopher. I've worked here at the Community Foundation on the Program and Grants team since 2008. Some of you may know me as the project lead on such work as the Samara Fund, the Northeast Kingdom Fund, the Vermont Arts Endowment Fund, and the Innovations and Collaborations Grant Program. But I'm here today to talk about nonprofit resources available to you through the Community Foundation that go beyond our grant programs. The Foundation supports its own suite of resources that are typically in support of our mission to increase the effectiveness and impact of giving in Vermont. We also partner with a group of Vermont and Northern New England-based organizations to provide a broader set of nonprofit capacity building resources. First, I'm going to tell you about the resources that we offer to nonprofits in-house here at the Foundation, starting with our nonprofit newsletter. The Foundation distributes a nonprofit newsletter several times each year that contains information, links, and guidance relating to our own grant programs, workshops, and nonprofit services, like nonprofit endowment funds, reserve funds, and the planned giving partnership. The newsletter contains reminders about important deadlines, interviews with community leaders, and information on events like the most recent Women's Fund celebration with NPR's Susan Stamberg. You can sign up for the newsletter on our website. There's a box at the bottom right corner of every page. Next up, social media. The Foundation also maintains an active social media presence on both Facebook and Twitter. You can find reminders of grant deadlines here as well on our social media platforms, and this is also a place where you can count on us to promote your Community Foundation funded projects. If you receive a grant from us, please make sure to tell us if there are public events coming up that you would like our help to publicize. We are happy and thrilled to put it out there for you. For example, we really want people to know about your rally, your community dinner, or your festival. If a newspaper or a radio station produces a great story about your work, we want to help get the story out there to more people, and we'll do that through Facebook and Twitter. We should also say that many Foundation staff members have their own Twitter feeds that you can follow and interact with. Please reach out to us and follow us. Some of us are better at tweeting than others, but we all want to improve our use of these tools. We'll send a list of our handles to you after the webinar is over. Next, press kits. Lauren talked about this earlier. Many of our grant programs, including all of the Community Fund grants, now come with press kits in the award letter. Please use them. Maybe you can generate great earned media, and we can then publicize that on our social media platforms. Next, a longtime resource at the Community Foundation is the Directory of Foundations. We want to help you build relationships with other funders, including corporate and family foundations. And to this end, we created the Vermont Directory of Foundations on our website. The searchable directory contains every foundation funder in Vermont, including keywords of their funding interests and regions, like housing, healthcare, civic engagement, or the arts, Rutland County, or the Northeast Kingdom. While many foundations listed are family foundations that don't have competitive public grant rounds, you can still identify likely prospects and send a short note to them with your mission statement, asking if they would like to learn more. Don't send unsolicited proposals, though. They're highly unlikely to be considered. Finally, the Foundation does sponsor a limited number of training events each year, both on applying to our own grant programs, like this webinar, or celebrating our grantees, like the upcoming Northeast Kingdom Fund Grantee Celebration. We also do topic-specific trainings, and for the last 3 years, the Foundation has worked with storytelling consultant Barbara Ganley to offer storytelling workshops around the state. These workshops have had a noticeable positive impact on the way that applicants write about their work and consequently on the number of proposals that we are able to fund through our Giving Together program. They have also helped grantees to develop stronger websites, better social media channels, and more informed earned media. For example, the Preservation Trust of Vermont has developed terrific story maps of preserved buildings around the state, and the Lake Champlain Sailing Center earned long-form stories on the local TV news. We will offer more storytelling workshops in 2016. Keep an eye out on our various communications channels for details. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the resources that we support outside the foundation. Common Good Vermont is the successor to the Vermont Association of Nonprofit Organizations. It is primarily a web-based resource, and Common Good Vermont maintains a crowdsourced database of capacity building resources. It operates a nonprofit capacity building events calendar and maintains a job board for the social sector for those looking to move. It provides several live training and networking events each year, and they also serve as a leading convener of nonprofit capacity building providers. Common Good Vermont is a great way to keep in touch with a broad swath of activities designed to help nonprofits perform at their best. We'll include a link to their site and all of these sites in the follow-up email after this is over. Nonprofit Next is a partnership with the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits and Common Good Vermont with funding from the Vermont Community Foundation. This resource platform offers tips, tools, samples, and templates that you can download and use right away to keep your board and operations running smoothly. All content on the site has been vetted by people who work in the nonprofit sector and understand the importance of being able to put your hands on the right resource at the right time. We hope that you'll be as excited by this new partnership and resource as we are. And if you need help figuring out what your bylaws should say or how to write a job description for your first development director, Nonprofit Next is the place to go. Next up, Marlborough College and the Center for New Leadership down in southern Vermont. That's a community focused on exploring and applying new approaches to leadership in the social sector. Working with mission-driven individuals, organizations, and coalitions, they build leadership capacity through teaching, coaching, and consulting. Their programs and consulting work incorporate a thorough assessment of the participants' current state and goals, and the center runs certificate and graduate programs in nonprofit leadership, as well as personalized consulting for nonprofit leaders and boards. The Center for New Leadership is for staff and board members that are looking to go deep on particular topics that will improve your management skills and ultimately your outcomes over the long haul. Benchmarks for a Better Vermont is a project of the Marlborough Center for New Leadership, and it's focused on promoting and training nonprofits and government agencies in the use of results-based accountability and other assessment and evaluation tools for excellent nonprofit management. Results-based accountability is becoming one of the dominant planning and evaluation tools for Vermont nonprofits, and Benchmarks for a Better Vermont can help your organization become part of the growing movement of nonprofit organizations that ask 3 simple questions to bend the curve on complex problems. How much are we doing? How well are we doing it? And is anyone better off? So while those are the networks and resources that are more directly connected to the Vermont Community Foundation, we also encourage you to utilize other kinds of networks as well, some of which may also support other kinds of organizations, including the public and private sectors. There are lots of networks in Vermont. Get plugged in. Here are just a couple of examples. The Planned Giving Council of New Hampshire and Vermont provides lots of resources, training, and networking events for nonprofit executives, development directors, and board members interested in improving their skills in legacy giving. The Vermont Creative Network is a new initiative linking creative folks across the state in the arts, technology, the makers movement, and more in an effort to build and promote the strong, stable, and successful creative economy in Vermont. With over 15% of Vermont's workers involved in creative endeavors, a strong sector is vital to Vermont's future. Finally, there are lots of great purely social networks available to Vermont nonprofit leaders, like Montpelier's Green Drinks, Socials for People in the Environmental Field, or Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibilities, Regional Mixers. Nonprofit capacity building can be fun. We'll include links to all of these in the follow-up email. And with that, I'd like to turn the webinar over to my colleague, Patrick Berry, Vice President for Philanthropy. He's going to tell us a little bit more about some of the direct services that the Foundation provides to nonprofits beyond our grant-making services. Take it away, Patrick.
Thanks, Christopher. Hi, my name is Patrick Berry. I'm the Vice President of Philanthropy here at the Foundation. I am part of a small team that helps work with nonprofits and individuals to create funds that benefit the nonprofit sector here at the Vermont Community Foundation. As Jen previously mentioned, unlike private foundations, we're a collection of about 680 different funds, that we help bring to the Community Foundation. We're regionally based in the philanthropy team so that we can try to create a better presence. We will work with existing individual and nonprofit fund holders, prospective individual and nonprofit fund holders, professional advisors like accountants, estate attorneys, and financial advisors who view us as partners in helping their clients with their charitable giving, and community leaders who can help us spread the word. As a part of our mission to help philanthropists cultivate their love of giving to the community, we're committed to strengthening the capacity of the state's nonprofit sector. And we do that in 4 additional ways, as if there were actually anything more we could do based on what you've learned from my colleagues here. The first of which is the competitive grant making, which you've been hearing about in detail from my colleagues, but there are a lot of other ways that we help nonprofits too. One thing we do in providing different mechanisms for people to find the causes that they love is allow people to set up what are basically charitable giving accounts here, otherwise known as donor advised funds. And unlike commercial gift funds that you might set up at Schwab, Fidelity, Vanguard, we provide a lot of value-added service that is very Vermont specific that other commercial gift funds just can't do. First of all, we research trends across the state, working with our nonprofit partners and with community leaders to help identify areas where philanthropists can make a difference. We've just issued our 2nd edition of Understanding Vermont. It's a report that can be found on our website that identifies 11 different issue areas, nonprofits where philanthropists can make an impact, and different trends where people can get an idea of how their giving can make a difference. I would encourage you to go take a look at that. Second of all, we identify important issue areas that can either be regionally or issue-based. My colleagues have identified 2. Janet mentioned the Food and Farm Initiative. That's an issue-based initiative where we're trying to help make an impact, and also the Northeast Kingdom Fund. That's a regional initiative. Janet also mentioned that we can help deal with very complex philanthropic structures like philanthropic support. But one of the most important things we do is philanthropic advising. Each of our philanthropic advisors works closely with donors to understand what their passions are and helps connect them with the innovative work that nonprofits are doing around the state. Some of you have asked the question, and some of you are probably wondering, well, how can you connect with fund holders? The best way to do this is actually through the existing grant programs. We pride ourselves on confidentiality, and it's definitely one of the leading purposes for which donors give through the Community Foundation is knowing that they can be anonymous in the ways that they give. But as previously mentioned, the Giving Together program, which Jen went through and has also been mentioned by Janet as well, it's a great way to get your organization and some of your great programs and projects in front of donors. They may choose to fund you, they may choose not to fund you, but at least they'll know who you are and get an idea of the value that you can provide within your community. The third way which we help nonprofits is through what are known as our nonprofit funds. It's basically our way of helping nonprofits realize world-class investment returns with endowments. I would encourage you, if you have an endowment, to take a look at what your investment returns have been. Some of you may have an endowment that is invested either in a money market account, some might be in a savings account, some might even be invested by a local financial investor who is trying to help you out or could be a part of your board. But we actually use a consultant out of New York City, Mike Miller from Colonial Consulting, who specializes in helping foundations and institutions of higher learning. That includes the San Francisco Community Foundation and the University of Miami. All told, they manage or consult on over $33 billion in assets. That means that when we have this bigger pool of $200 million and we allow nonprofits to become a part of that pool, we get access to some of the best investors in the country whose minimum buy-in for their incredible returns might be $25 or $50 million. So that opportunity to get world-class investment returns, even with a smaller endowment pooled with our funds, is definitely a big draw. It also provides protection for your assets. Whether your endowment is $30,000 or $5 million, it's still not quite big enough to be buffered from the volatility of the market. Our annual recommended distribution is 5% of the principal of the funds, and even though most endowments during the 2008 recession may have lost up to 25–40% of their endowment, we only changed our recommended annual distribution to 4.5%, and that was just for a small period of time because we really didn't want nonprofits to be hurt by the recession. It is definitely our fastest area of growth with our funds, and we've had 15 million in new nonprofit funds this year, which brings us up to about 150 nonprofits that now have their endowments invested with us. We also provide administrative support. You can choose to receive your distribution quarterly, annually, or have it rolled back into your fund, and it's something you never have to worry about. Now, there are two different kinds of funds. One is called a nonprofit endowed fund. That's set up to be like an endowment, as you might normally assume, where a board and or executive director may want to create a legacy that can't be changed. So once you set up an endowed fund, it will remain, the principal will remain intact unless it grows over time, and you can only draw from the principal. But a couple years ago, recognizing that some nonprofit boards and staffs were concerned that once that money was tied up, they may never be able to get access to it if they had some kind of urgent need, we now offer what's known as a reserve fund. It allows you to realize all the benefits of the endowed fund, but at any time, with simply filling out a one-pager with a signature of an officer of the board and the executive director, you can receive an additional distribution from the principal of that fund, and that usually only takes 2 weeks. We have never had a request for a reserve fund rejected, and while we don't want people to think about this as a savings account, you can withdraw from that fund as many times as you might need. I would strongly encourage you to take a look at the nonprofit funds because we feel like it's one of the best things that we do to help support nonprofits in the long run. The last thing we do is our planned giving partnership. Even if nonprofits have excellent annual fund or major giving programs, there's very little expertise within nonprofits on planned giving products, whether it's bequests, which may include something complicated like gifts of property, charitable gift annuities, or various kinds of trusts. We will work with you and your donors to help set these up on your behalf, and it's at no cost to you. So if you have somebody that walks in and says, I would love to be able to set up some kind of planned giving product, an annuity, a trust, I'm not really sure, instead of saying, oh boy, I don't really know anything about that. If you're a part of our planned giving partnership, you get to say, no problem, I will call my colleague Patrick at the Community Foundation. We will sit down and we'll figure out a way that you can create a legacy for our organization through one of these planned giving products. It's a simple memorandum of understanding that just takes a signature. It's a very uncomplicated process, and it really opens the door for different kinds of giving products that you may not normally or historically been able to offer to your donors. We'll even help you with templates to create bequest societies and other kinds of ways to get support from your donors. So with that, I would just say if you're interested in any of those additional things that we do, specifically the nonprofit funds and the planned giving partnership, you can feel free to give me or any of my colleagues a call within the philanthropy team. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jen, who can wrap up and move on to some questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Christopher. That was a lot of information about other services that the foundation provides for nonprofits, because we are trying to be responsive to what we understand the needs are in the sector. And I'll just reiterate that we're happy to talk more about any of these resources, so please reach out. We hope we did answer some of your questions as part of the main presentation, but now we want to address a few more of the questions that many of you asked when you registered. Staff are going to take turns answering some of the most frequently asked questions, and the first was about whether we fund general operating support. Janet, do you want to take this one?
Sure, Jen. And I hate to disappoint, but the answer is generally no. Most of our competitive grant rounds do not provide general operating support. None of the community fund grant rounds provide general operating support. A few of the place-based grant rounds do. You'll need to read the guidelines for the grant rounds in your area. I want to say that we completely understand that general operating support is really valuable to your organizations and why you want it. But we hope that you understand that we are trying to make the most of the resources that we have and trying to inspire additional giving by the donors we're connected with. And we just can't put forward general operations for all of your completely fabulous and essential organizations. Christopher, there's another tough one for you.
How can I get funding for capital campaigns, building improvements, or repairs? Many of our donor advised funds do provide support for capital campaigns and infrastructure projects. However, most of our competitive grant rounds do not provide this kind of support. Though in the case of infrastructure projects, there are a few significant exceptions. Special and urgent needs grants can support emergency or unanticipated building improvements or repairs. As a general rule, SUN grants won't support deferred maintenance projects, but they can support unanticipated building repairs, like roofs leaking because a tree branch fell or a broken HVAC system. You can also include modest, necessary infrastructure line items in other project-based grant proposals. For example, we have supported accessibility improvements to buildings hosting performing arts programs for youth with disabilities. In this case, the programming could not actually occur without a ramp, a required improvement. Our competitive grant programs, without exception, do not support capital campaigns. At any given time in Vermont, there are dozens of worthy capital campaign opportunities, and because of the scale of capital campaigns across the state, we choose to focus on funding specific programming instead. Passing it back to you, Jen.
So, relationships. Several people have asked this question, and here's how one of you phrased it. I hear a lot about building relationships with grantors over time. How important is relationship building prior to submitting a proposal? So this is a great question, and as you've likely guessed, we don't usually have yes or no answers at the foundation. The first part of the answer is that you don't need to have met us or talked to us to get a grant from us. It's really the strength of your proposal and the other criteria that we reviewed earlier that we use when we're making our decision. The second part of the answer is that we're happy to talk on the phone and meet, and when writing a proposal, it's better to call us and discuss your questions before submitting your proposal, rather than submitting your proposal and leaving us with lots of questions. So many of you have asked us these questions about some of the common mistakes we see on proposals and what makes a proposal really stand out. We all had a few thoughts that we wanted to share about each of those questions, so we'll start with some of the common mistakes we see. Lauren, what do you come across in terms of errors on proposals?
So one of the biggest mistakes that I see is waiting until the last 15 minutes before the 5 p.m. grant deadline to start entering a grant that you've prepared offline into the online grants manager. When you use the online grants manager for the first time, there is a two-step process of creating an account and then entering your application information. And this can take longer than you may think. Just make sure that you've made time for it. What about you, Janet?
Well, the piece of information that I'm always surprised is missing is the number of people you plan to reach, or another specific piece of information that really helps us understand the scope of your program. For example, does this program last all summer, or is it a one-day celebration? And we want that information not because we think that bigger is better. We've funded projects that serve 6 people and some that reach thousands. But we really need to be able to understand your project fully, to be able to evaluate it, and to share it through our Giving Together program. And these are the details that help us imagine what you are proposing. Christopher, what do you see?
I'm going to talk a little bit about letters of support. If the grant program requires letters of support from partners or supporters, please make sure that you work to solicit and collect these letters in advance of the deadline. We cannot accept late or incomplete applications, and you never know when one of your letter writers or their manager who has to approve it may be about to get on a plane to Bora Bora. It's happened almost every grant round. It's also important to us and the grant readers that your letters of support are original work, that it's accurate, and that it's from the heart of the letter writer. It's certainly okay and even encouraged that you help your supporters craft strong letters of support, but please don't just send them boilerplate language to print out on their own letterhead. Nothing is more discouraging when reading grant proposals than receiving the exact same letter of support from 3 different people. Great letters of support really speak to the specific reasons why the letter writer is invested in the success of your project. What about you, Jen? What's something that you've seen that can hurt an application?
Well, one of the things I've seen a few times is instead of answering a question is to provide a website link or to refer to an attachment. You know, it's great for you to include your website address as an addendum to your answer or even to refer to an attachment in the proposal. And we love that as a supplement, but you really need to check to put the answer in the text box. We'll look at that if we have time to check it out, but a lot of times we're reading proposals in batches in a specified window of time, and we may not have time to go and find an answer on a website. So it's really a big risk not to answer the question and just put the website or an attachment without any explicit answer. So now, in addition to some no-nos to keep in mind when preparing a proposal, we also want to highlight some of the things in proposals that can really make your application stand out, that can really make the difference. Lauren, why don't you get us started?
So for me, an application really stands out when the work and mission of the organization is clearly described and explained to an audience that may not know a thing about you. Think about the reader's perspective while you're writing your application. We don't want to have to make assumptions. Janet?
Well, I look for evidence of really thoughtful program development. Why this project and why now? I like to understand how this project will advance your work, how it builds on what you've already done, how it incorporates what you've learned in the past, or how it leverages a specific opportunity available to you right now. Christopher?
For me, a really great proposal always comes from both the head and the heart, and it includes a full range of affected community members in the program design and implementation. The proposals that really stand out include serious, thoughtful, and inclusive participation of diverse constituents and community members in planning, decision-making, and leadership. So if you're proposing an anti-poverty program, try to make sure that people living on a low income in your community have a serious chance to weigh in on the program design. If you are proposing to do youth leadership development, make sure that the youth are actually calling the shots. This may require you to gather and process input and feedback in ways that you aren't used to, but build this into your professional development regimen. There are lots of tools available to help you define and execute a true community engagement strategy. Jen?
Well, we try and make this really evident in the application form, but we can't emphasize enough how important the story and the photograph are. These are especially critical for the Giving Together program. This is your way of bringing your work and the data about what you do to life for us and for the donor advisors. We ask you to reflect on what it would look like if your program is successful, to really paint a picture. If you've attended our storytelling workshops, you've heard Barbara Ganley, our consultant, talk about how we are storytelling species. We use stories to connect to each other and understand each other on a personal and emotional level. Pictures tell the story too, so if possible, try not to default to submitting your logo as your picture. Get creative. One program sent us a picture of art their students had made because they couldn't legally share images of the people in their programs. It was really nice. Well, it looks like we have about 10 minutes to answer questions, so we're going to open it up now to anything that we may not have been able to answer during our presentation. This is a little more free-form than what we prepared, so bear with us as we take turns seeing what you're interested in. So one of the questions is it better to ask for a smaller amount or for the full grant? This is Jen, and I will say it really depends. We do, particularly in the Small and Inspiring Grant Round, often fund the full proposal. But in some of the grant rounds where we're giving bigger amounts, it's always great. We always love to see that there's other people that are committed in supporting your work. So that, so when you have other funders, that's great, but it's not always absolutely necessary. I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to add to that.
This is Christopher. I would say ask for what you need. So it's important to really give us the full picture of the real budget. And sometimes programs are going to cost more than the maximum. Sometimes they're going to cost less than the maximum. But it's important that we understand what your program is actually going to cost.
So one of the questions I see is whether we can support Vermont nonprofits that do work internationally in our competitive grant programs.
Yeah. This is Christopher. I'm happy to answer that. I do a fair amount of work with programs that have international components to them. We will occasionally fund Vermont organizations that do some work internationally, but almost always that is for work that is happening in Vermont. So, for example, we have supported cultural exchange programs, and the part that we have supported has been the piece of the cultural exchange that happens in the state of Vermont. So if you have questions about that, you're welcome to give me a shout. We generally won't support international programs where the programming is happening entirely out of state.
So the next question that this is Jen, that I'm gonna pull out is, where can we submit our story and photographs of our work? And that's part of your application. There'll be places where you're asked to provide that information on every application that you fill out.
Okay. This is Janet, and I see a question up here that asks, are there any grants that focus on technology improvements and equipment? And I'm going to have a disappointing answer again, but is that we really see the technology, the basic technology is now just a part of general operating. It's just like you wouldn't necessarily pick out for us to fund your light bill or your phone bill, and basically sort of computer costs and sort of basic, some of the basic costs of doing business in terms of technology, your website, things like that. Those are generally costs of doing business. There might be, cases where, a really upgrading to a new software that allows you to serve your clients in a new way that really advances your programmatic mission. That might be part of what your budget is and what you're submitting for. And that would be something that, we would consider that as part of your budget, but it really needs to be programmatically driven. It needs to be about the impact you're going to be able to have, and not just about the functioning of your organization. There is a resource called TechSoup, and you could just Google it and find it, that does, which is an entity that works to channel technology resources towards nonprofits. So that's one place that you could check out for something specific to technology. So we're looking for a couple other questions. People are chatting in questions for us, so we appreciate that, you guys.
Will you accept video in lieu of photographs for support material?
So really the only grant program where we're able to accept videos is the Vermont Arts Endowment Fund, and we have a pretty specific way of including attachments for that. So you'll want to follow the instructions in that application program. As Jen mentioned, you can always reference a website or other piece of information as an addendum for an application, but you wouldn't want to replace a question with something that someone would need to search for online.
Can an organization apply to more than one grant, say a small and inspiring and a collaboration grant? The answer to that question is yes, but you can't apply to small and inspiring and innovations and collaborations for the same project, because those are really focused on two different scales of projects and with two different intentions. But if you have two different projects, you're welcome to apply to both of them.
Next question that's coming up, this is Christopher. Are there grants for board member training and or sending board members to associations or conventions for training? There are not really grants for professional development in this way, either for board members or for staff. But there is a nonprofit capacity building grant round that you might want to check out if you're doing strategic planning with your board. That is not about training so much as it is about planning work for your organization, but that's an issue-oriented grant round that you could find on our website.
There's another question. Can you explain the Common Ground Center again? So I believe we were talking about Common Good Vermont, which is different from the Common Ground Center, which is actually another nonprofit in Starksboro, Vermont. But Common Good Vermont, and it's commongoodvt.org. So it is a It's an online platform and it's crowdsourced, so the information that's on it is provided by all of you in the sector, and they offer resources such as trainings, newsletters, they have a blog, they have a calendar, they have a job posting site. And they are also the link for getting through to Nonprofit Next, which is the website which has sort of templates and resources, particularly around board development, in relation to the previous question. So I think we are going to take some time to wrap it up. I want to make sure we finish, as we said, we'd end at 2:45. So we want you to be successful with your application to the Community Foundation, and hopefully you've learned a few things today that can help you in that regard. I want to thank my colleagues Christopher and Patrick and Janet and Lauren for joining me here today to share all this good information with you. And I also want to thank you for taking the time to be here. Please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions about our resources for nonprofits. Most of them are linked on our website. This webinar is also going to be available soon on the site if you want to go back to anything, or others that might be interested in listening to it. When you log off, you're going to be invited to take a feedback survey on what was helpful and what we need to work on so we can make it a more valuable experience. And we'll also be in touch via email with a lot of links of more information about what we've discussed today. And that email will also include a link to the survey if you missed it when you were logging off. So thank you again from all of us at the Community Foundation for the great work that you do, and have a great rest of your day.